So as soon as I really start to see some of those characteristics, and I'm just really cognizant of bringing it up as characteristics, right? These are not red flags and they're not really necessarily good or bad. They're just, these are the things I'm noticing with your child. It just is what it is. And now we can really just look at your child and start where they are at. So it's looking at more of a growth mindset, I think, than some parents, they'll hear autism and they go down that rabbit hole and it can be really scary. So I just like to be able to kind of start walking them through the process right away.
Hey there, and welcome to the Speechy Side Up podcast. My name is Vanita Litvack, and I am so grateful you're here. I'm an ASHA certified speech language pathologist, author, and augmentative and alternative communication consultant who is obsessed with helping SLPs like you stop reinventing the wheel and connect with other SLPs in the trenches. Have you ever wondered how other SLPs seem to be doing it all with ease? Well, around here, you'll get to hear firsthand how SLPs are really getting things done while keeping evidence-based practice and self-care in mind. Think of this as a coffee date with your SLP friends. Get ready to be challenged and encouraged while we learn together. Today, I'm joined by Jesse Kinsey. Jesse is a pediatric speech language pathologist and toddler mom. She owns a private practice called Simply Speech Therapy in Southern California and provides parent coaching to families of late talkers. Prior to becoming a speech therapist, she was a high school English teacher. Her mission through speech therapy and parent coaching is to celebrate children's unique strengths and interests while helping them communicate successfully at home and in the community. Jesse, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So, does that cover everything, or is there anything else you'd like to add before we talk about your private practice?
No, I think you got it.
Awesome. So, what motivated you to start your private practice?
Yeah. So, what really motivated me to start my practice and kind of like got the gears in motion was having my son. I have a toddler. He's just over 1 years old. And that was kind of my catalyst for, it's time to make a change. I wanted that flexibility of a schedule. And so I made the jump. But really, it's something I had always wanted to do. I worked in a school and then I was working part time in a private practice. And I realized that that wasn't feasible with a baby on the way. And it was time to kind of try out my dream and actually start a practice. So when I was pregnant and then when I was on maternity leave with my son is really when I got my company up and running.
Wow. So, it's a little over a year or a little under a year old?
Yeah, he's a little over a year old, and my company just hit the year mark. So I've been seeing clients privately for, yeah, about a year.
Full time, part time?
Part time. Yeah,
Okay.
part time. So I see clients about 3 days a week. I see clients Tuesday, Thursday, and then like half the days on Wednesday and Saturday. So it's nice. It's very flexible for me right now. And then I have an awesome SLPA who sees clients too.
That's amazing. At what point did you hire the SLPA?
Um, Probably about 6 months in, I hired her. I realized that my caseload was growing. I was kind of at my max. It's so easy when you start a practice. You want to do all the things, but I've had to be very, very specific, and I wanted to make sure that I had boundaries. So
Mhm.
I was not working too much with my little son at home. And so when I hit about 6 months and I had the caseload to back it up, I hired Gabby, my SLPA.
Amazing. And then you were able to bring on even more clients from that, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Nice.
we work through the regional center of Orange County. We're in Southern California, and that's been a pretty good stream of clients for us. So that's been nice.
Amazing. So, how has starting your private practice shifted your mindset toward the field of speech language pathology?
Yeah, I guess starting my private practice has really given me a look on the other side. I had worked in a private practice, I had worked in a school setting, but now that I'm my own private practice owner, I get to see kind of like the messy background that's going on. Sometimes it makes me understand choices that maybe like a different private practice had made or a school had made. And then sometimes I think, oh, good, I'm glad I get to do this differently. But it's definitely showed me that other side, which has been interesting. And the biggest thing is just I've really seen how much of a need there is. When I was in the school setting, I didn't realize just how many students, how many clients, how many, kids really are still needing service and are being underserved. So that was a huge wake up call for me.
Wow. Yeah. It helps you have a little more compassion for other business owners, right? As an employee, we want a lot, of course. Like we want work life balance and we want the benefits and we want the great pay. And then you see the other side of the business owner who's maybe even just starting out, like you just hit your year mark. And that first year is a lot. It's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of financial stress. But and then there's this, like, juncture where you hire somebody or where you're getting too busy that you need to hire somebody, but then you don't have enough clientele yet, so it's that risk that you're taking as well, but that you're right, there's a huge, huge need for more private practices.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's scary. And I think that was part of it that I didn't totally expect. Is it's scary to go out on your own and start your own practice and take on that risk for yourself. And then when you hire someone, you take on that risk for them too, because you have to pay them and they need to make a living wage too. And so it's definitely, it's definitely been a journey.
Yeah. Yeah, private practice isn't for everybody, like, if you don't want that responsibility of making sure that you can pay somebody on, a biweekly basis or whatever you decide, then maybe it isn't for you. But if you are willing to take risk and you love growing things and you love doing things on your own terms, then it's probably a great avenue.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely.
So, in your opinion, why is it important to have a good understanding of Gestalt language processing as a primarily early intervention speech therapist?
Yeah, so it's funny because I was in the schools and I knew that I was kind of a jack of all trades, right? When you're in the schools, you're working with so many different types of students all the time, and you need to know a little bit about everything. And then when I decided to start my own practice, I was like, okay, you know what? This is my time. I'm going to get focused and I'm going to kind of get like a niche. And I want to learn more and more about this early intervention setting. And I want to, specialize a little bit more. And I dove into early intervention. I realized that's just not quite true because you're starting with all of these tiny little ones and you really don't know what their need is. So you still have to be this kind of jack of all trades, I think. And so knowing when you start working with a client to be kind of that detective really, really early on, are they an analytic language processor, right? Are they a Gestalt language processor? And starting to kind of make those diagnoses or making those understandings really early has been huge. It can really shift the way I do therapy right away instead of waiting until that student is 3 years old, 4 years old, and then being like, oh, wait a second. So I think it's still important, even with those little ones, to just kind of have a good understanding of different diagnoses because that's really where, that toddler's at.
It's such a good point, in particular, early intervention. It's like a pediatrician. A pediatrician kind of has to know everything and then they refer out to the specialist. If you're an early intervention SLP, you need to know the basis about everything so that you can refer out if needed.
Absolutely. Yes.
That makes sense. So, how can you support neurodiversity and inclusion through early intervention services?
Yeah. So the biggest thing for me since I started my practice is I do in-home therapy. So I'm going into all of my clients' homes. I thought that was something that was going to be part-time or just until I can get a clinic, but I actually love it because I'm getting to join this family, right? In this family dynamic. And I'm there, pretty consistently. A lot of my clients I see twice a week. And so I'm really joining into this family. And I'm realizing that I can start some of those neurodiversity affirming practices and thought processes just so early with these parents and with these families. So, with early intervention, you're really there right when they're like, okay, my child's not talking. I need speech support. They're usually nervous. They're usually scared, like what's going on. And so it's nice to be able to come in and just immediately start talking to them and walking them through the processes and walking them through what things might look like. And I've noticed that if they're kind of in the process of getting, especially an autism diagnosis, it's nice to be able to right away start putting some of those more positive characteristics and positive neurodiversity affirming thoughts in right away when they're, just hearing this news for the first time.
Right. So, what does that look like if you find you have a family who is nervous or you are suspecting autism? How do you approach that with families?
Yeah. So as soon as I really start to see some of those characteristics, and I'm just really cognizant of bringing it up as characteristics, right? These are not red flags. These are not like, ooh, I don't know, maybe I'm seeing these things, right? These are just characteristics and they're not really necessarily good or bad. These are the things I'm noticing with your child. And I know it's like a tricky situation to broach, but I'll just say, have you talked to your pediatrician about autism, or has that been something that's come up in conversation? Most of the time, it is something they've already heard. And so I'm not usually like the very, very first person to kind of bring it up, but sometimes I am. And then just being able to explain, these are characteristics, but again, they're not good or bad. It just is what it is. And now we can really just look at your child and start where they are at. So it's looking at more of a growth mindset, I think, than some parents, they'll hear autism and they go down that rabbit hole and it can be really scary. So I just like to be able to kind of start walking them through the process right away.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you're probably one of the first therapists that they start with too, especially if like the only thing that they're noticing is speech.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of times, a child not talking is kind of their first step to get support. And so a speech therapist comes in, and I think almost every parent at this point has gone down that Google rabbit hole, and they're freaking out and they're scared and they're overwhelmed. And so to be able to come in and just start talking to them and start looking at like, hey, these are all of your child's strengths. Let's build on these can be really helpful.
Hmm. So, in your initial session, are you doing an evaluation or are you like getting to know the child and then doing the evaluation at another point?
Yeah. So it depends. When you're working through, like, I see a lot of my clients through the regional center in California. So if you're in California, sometimes they're coming to me with their evaluation already done. And sometimes I'm the one doing it. But either way, I let families know my main focus initially is building rapport, because that's just the most important part. That's how you're going to see what they're actually capable of doing, is by building really good rapport and making sure they feel comfortable sharing the language that they do have. And so building rapport is always that first step. I explain that to parents. My first couple sessions, my focus is not on language, right? My focus is just on building rapport.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great. I asked because you had mentioned like when you're in early intervention, you're looking at is this an analytic language processor? Is this a Gestalt language processor? And I think, those evaluations look different. So that's something that I've been kind of adjusting recently. I used to do the evaluation initially. So I would do the evaluation like the first session, but I was talking to a friend who has a private practice nearby, and she said that she spends the first session's like a meet and greet. She still charges for it. And then the next one is like also just like building rapport. And then maybe by like the third, she starts the evaluation. And I like that because I also think it gets parents to kind of buy into it a little bit more. I've seen some parents who just want to get the evaluation and then they like don't come back, or they'll find somebody maybe like closer to them, especially if you are like specialized in Gestalt language processing, not specialized, but like trained in Gestalt language processing. So that has been an interesting shift, but a good one I've noticed. So do
Mhm.
you do anything like that? What does your intake process look like?
Yeah. So it looks different depending on the client. And that's just because if I'm seeing a client through the regional center, their process is kind of set. And so really they do an evaluation, and then I'm kind of doing that detective work after, potentially. And then I also take private pay clients. And for those, I've noticed I've started to do something very similar. The first session or two, I'm not jumping into an evaluation. I'm really building rapport, because then you're able to learn so much more about that client and see really what's going to be helpful to them. So yeah, when I have the flexibility, that would be my preference. The first session or two, it's going to be building rapport, collecting some language samples, but I'm not going to jump into like a standardized test right away if I can help it.
Right. And you're getting a much better picture of what the child can do. It's just way more valid, I think. I just remember working for a private practice that accepted insurance, and we had to do the evaluation that first session within such a short period of time. And, most of the time the kids were very cooperative and it worked out, but there were other instances where you could not get any information, but then you still had to write up an evaluation. So, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. And I know families struggle with that. And I don't blame them, because, and I've had this happen often, is if you do have to, for insurance or for something else, if you do have to do that assessment right away, the family saying, well, they can do all these things, but they weren't included in the assessment, or they weren't included in the report. And that can be so frustrating. So I think the more that you can build rapport and really get to know the child, and just to a really good quality parent interview, it can make a big impact.
Right, because if you get an evaluation back, you want it to be representative of your child. If it's not, you're like, "Did they even do the evaluation on my actual child? Is this even accurate? Because they're saying that they can't do these things, but they can.
Mhm.
So, like, are these goals even appropriate? Yeah, it's definitely a problem, I think. And so it's nice to see this shift that private practices are able to make because I think it's going to benefit the client a lot more in the long run.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share, or maybe some piece of advice that you have for SLPs who are thinking about private practice?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. As I started my private practice and, I got my kind of social media up and running, is a lot of my friends that are also SLPs have been reaching out like, hey, how did you do this? Or how do you feel? Or was it worth it? And the biggest thing is I would say yes. If you are willing to take that risk, I mean, it definitely is scary at first, but if you're willing to take that risk, then I think that it's really, really beneficial because you do get to kind of create exactly what you want. I get to see the clients that I'm most passionate about and I get to kind of build this practice in a way that, feels good for me and that works with my family and that's been really rewarding.
Amazing. Such good advice. Well, thank you, Jesse, so much. This has been awesome. If people want to find and connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so on social media and Instagram, I'm at simply speech underscore. I post a lot of strategies and tips for late talkers, but I'd love to have you follow me there. And if you have questions or anything, feel free to message me. And then you can also find me at simplyspeechtherapy.org.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jesse.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. By the way, have you joined the SSU crew yet? By joining, you get access to the free good section on our website, plus podcast updates, special event notifications, and therapy inspiration. You can sign up at bit.ly/join SSU crew, all lowercase, or just find the link in this episode description. Also, don't forget to take a screenshot of this episode so that you can always refer back to it and share it on social media if you really love the topic. Take care and remember to always fill your speechy side cup first before you can pour into others.